Picture this. It is February. Your furnace just died. And within 48 hours, 3 different contractors are sitting at your kitchen table, every single one of them steering you toward the same piece of equipment you have never owned before. Not one of them leads with a gas furnace quote. They all lead with a heat pump. And you are sitting there thinking, did the whole industry change overnight, or is something else going on here? That question is exactly what this video is going to answer, and the answer involves more money and more power than most homeowners ever realize. To understand what is happening right now, you need a quick baseline on what a heat pump actually is, because a lot of the confusion starts here. A ducted air source heat pump is essentially a central AC unit that can run in reverse. In summer, it pulls heat from inside your house and dumps it outside, exactly like your existing central AC. In winter, it flips the cycle and pulls heat from the outdoor air and moves it inside. Same ductwork, same thermostat, one system doing both jobs. That is the core concept, and once you have it, everything else in this video makes sense. Now here is the efficiency number that gets thrown around constantly. The Department of Energy says modern heat pumps can cut electricity use for heating by up to 75% compared with electric resistance heating. Think baseboard heaters or an electric furnace. Consumer Reports, citing National Renewable Energy Laboratory analysis, puts heat pumps at roughly 2 to 4 times more efficient than traditional electric resistance or oil furnaces. The Conservation Law Foundation goes further and says for every single unit of electricity you put in, a heat pump delivers roughly 3 units of heat out. In HVAC terms, that is a coefficient of performance, or COP, of about 3. That number is real, and it is genuinely impressive. And cold weather performance used to be the legitimate knock against heat pumps. Not anymore. The DOE ran field tests in 2021 on what the industry now calls cold climate air source heat pumps, and found they could operate at outdoor temperatures as low as negative 15 degrees Fahrenheit. That is negative 26 Celsius. DOE's own consumer guidance now states that heat pumps are a viable alternative to furnaces and AC for all climates. For someone in the upper Midwest or Mid-Atlantic, that is a significant statement coming from a federal agency that does not exactly lead with marketing language. So the technology is legitimate. The efficiency gains are real. The cold weather limitations have been substantially addressed. I want to be completely clear about that before we go any further, because this video is not a hit piece on heat pumps as a technology. What this video is about is something different. Why the push for heat pumps has become so aggressive, so universal, and so disconnected from whether a specific homeowner in a specific location will actually come out ahead financially. Because those are 2 very different conversations, and the industry is only having one of them with you. Let me show you what is actually happening here, because it starts with incentives. Follow the incentive, and you will find the problem every single time. Right now, 4 separate and very powerful groups all have a financial or political reason to want you to buy a heat pump instead of a gas furnace and central AC. Federal and state governments, electric utilities, equipment manufacturers, and rebate program administrators. And here is what makes this unusual. All 4 of their incentives are pointing in the same direction at the same time. That kind of alignment is rare, and when it happens, it creates enormous pressure on the people at the end of the chain. That is you, the homeowner. Start with the federal government. The Inflation Reduction Act created 2 major consumer-facing programs tied to heat pumps. The High Efficiency Electric Home Rebate Act, known as HEEHRA, offers point-of-sale rebates of up to $8,000 specifically for heat pump installation. There are also federal tax credits under Section 25C that cover 30% of the cost of a qualifying heat pump, up to $2,000 per year. A comparable gas furnace replacement gets a 30% credit too, but capped at $600. That is a $1,400 difference in federal support between two systems that might cost similar amounts to install. That gap is not accidental. It is policy design. State governments layer on top of that. Many states have created their own rebate programs, efficiency incentive programs, and in some cases, outright bans or restrictions on new gas appliance installations in new construction. California, New York, and Massachusetts have all moved in this direction at various points. For a homeowner in the Mid-Atlantic or Upper Midwest, your state energy office may be offering an additional $1,000 to $3,000 in rebates specifically for heat pumps, rebates that are not available for a gas furnace. When you stack federal and state incentives together, the subsidy gap between a heat pump and a furnace plus AC combo can easily reach $5,000 or more in some markets. Now, here is where the contractor conversation gets interesting. When a homeowner qualifies for significant rebates, some of those rebates flow through the contractor as a point-of-sale discount, meaning the contractor processes the paperwork and passes the savings to you at the time of installation. That sounds great, and sometimes it is. But it also means the contractor has a financial processing relationship with the rebate program, and in some cases earns administrative fees or has preferred vendor relationships tied to specific equipment brands. The contractor knows things you do not, and that gap is where the money goes. Not always maliciously, but the structure creates pressure toward the rebate-eligible equipment regardless of whether it is the right call for your home. The second group pushing heat pumps is electric utilities, and their motivation is straightforward. Heat pumps run on electricity. If you switch from a gas furnace to a heat pump, your electricity consumption goes up significantly, especially in a cold winter. For a typical 2,000 square foot home in a cold climate, switching from gas heat to a heat pump can add anywhere from 2,000 to 5,000 kilowatt hours of electricity consumption per heating season, depending on climate, insulation, and equipment efficiency. From the utilities perspective, that is new kilowatt-hour revenue on infrastructure they have already built. Many utilities have become active partners in heat pump rebate programs precisely because growing electricity demand is good for their business model. The third group is equipment manufacturers, and their motivation involves something called variable speed inverter-driven compressor technology. Cold climate heat pumps that perform well at -15 degrees Fahrenheit are not cheap commodity equipment. They are sophisticated variable speed machines with premium refrigerant circuits and advanced controls. A baseline ducted heat pump system starts around $3,500 to $5,000 just for the equipment, not including installation. A high-efficiency cold climate unit can push that equipment cost to $6,000 or more. Compare that to a mid-efficiency gas furnace at roughly $800 to $1,500 for the unit alone. Manufacturers earn significantly more margin on a heat pump sale than on a furnace sale, and they have invested heavily in lobbying and marketing to protect that. Now let us talk about installed costs, because equipment cost is only part of the picture. National Renewable Energy Laboratory data puts the installed cost for a minimum efficiency ducted heat pump at around $9,000 for a typical home. A high-efficiency cold climate system installed can run $12,000 to $18,000 or more, depending on your region, ductwork condition, and whether you need a backup heat source. A gas furnace and central AC replacement in the same home might run $6,000 to $10,000 installed, depending on equipment tier. Even after rebates, the heat pump is often the more expensive upfront choice. That gap has to be recovered somewhere, and the argument is always that you recover it in lower monthly bills. That is where the story gets complicated. Here's the number I want you to hold on to for the rest of this video. A New York State analysis found that only 27% of natural gas-heated homes would see lower annual energy bills after switching to a heat pump at current utility rates. Read that again. 27%. That means roughly 73% of homes in that analysis would not come out ahead on their monthly bills, even though the heat pump is a more efficient machine. How is that possible? The answer is in the relationship between your local electricity rate and your local natural gas rate. And it is the number that almost nobody in the sales conversation is putting on the table. Let me explain the math, because this is not complicated. It was just never explained to you. A heat pump with a COP of 3 delivers 3 units of heat for every 1 unit of electricity consumed. That sounds like a massive win over a gas furnace that converts roughly 80 to 95% of its fuel to heat. But here is the catch. In most of the United States, electricity costs roughly 3 to 4 times more per BTU of delivered energy than natural gas does. So even though the heat pump is physically more efficient, the fuel it runs on is so much more expensive per unit that the bill savings can disappear or reverse entirely depending on your specific utility rates. The physics favor the heat pump. The economics depend entirely on your local rate structure. Here is a concrete example to make this tangible. Suppose your gas furnace uses 800 therms of natural gas in a heating season. At a typical Midwest residential rate of around $1.10 per therm, that is $880 in gas heating costs. Now suppose a heat pump replaces that same heating load with 1/3 the energy input. So roughly 7,800 kilowatt hours of electricity. At a typical Midwest residential electricity rate of around 14 cents per kilowatt hour, that is $1,092 in electric heating costs. The heat pump used less energy in raw physical terms, but it cost you $212 more on your annual bill. That is the gap the 27% figure is capturing, and it is why your local utility rates are the single most important variable in this decision. Now, your numbers will be different. If you are in a state with high natural gas prices and relatively affordable electricity, like parts of the Pacific Northwest with cheap hydroelectric power, the math can swing strongly in the heat pump's favor. If you are in a state with expensive electricity and cheap natural gas, like much of the Midwest and Mid-Atlantic right now, the math often goes the other way. The critical homework you need to do before any contractor conversation is to pull your last 12 months of gas bills and your last 12 months of electric bills. Calculate your actual cost per therm and your actual cost per kilowatt hour and run the comparison yourself. No contractor is going to do this analysis for you unprompted because the answer might kill the sale. Let us talk about where heat pumps genuinely do make financial sense, because I want to be precise here. If you are currently heating with electric resistance, oil, or propane, the heat pump math almost always works in your favor. Electric resistance heating has a COP of 1, meaning 1 unit of electricity in, 1 unit of heat out. A heat pump's COP of 3 cuts your heating electricity consumption by 2/3 compared to baseboard heaters. That is a real, bankable savings. If you are on oil or propane, which are expensive per BTU in most markets, the heat pump can also pencil out well. The DOE's 75% efficiency gain claim is specifically compared to electric resistance heating, and that context matters enormously. But if you are on natural gas in the Midwest or Mid-Atlantic, which describes a very large portion of the audience watching this right now, The financial case is much more ambiguous. And that ambiguity is almost never surfaced in the contractor conversation, in the government rebate marketing, or in the manufacturer's promotional materials. All three of those sources have a financial incentive to move you toward the heat pump, regardless of your specific situation. If you do not understand it, you cannot push back on it. So let us keep understanding it. There is another layer to the cost conversation that almost never comes up. Ductwork. Heat pumps move a larger volume of air at lower temperature differentials than gas furnaces do. A gas furnace blows air at 120 to 140 degrees Fahrenheit. A heat pump in heating mode blows air at 90 to 100 degrees Fahrenheit, which feels lukewarm compared to what you are used to. To heat the same space with cooler air, the system needs to move more of it. That means your existing ductwork, if it was sized for a gas furnace, may be undersized for a heat pump and may need to be modified or replaced. Ductwork remediation can add $1,000 to $5,000 to an installation cost, and it is the kind of thing that does not always show up in the initial quote. There is also the question of backup heat. In a cold climate, a heat pump at negative 15 degrees Fahrenheit is operating at the edge of its rated capacity. Most cold climate systems include or require a backup heat source for the coldest days of the year, typically electric resistance strip heaters built into the air handler. On those days when it is minus 10 outside and the heat pump is struggling, those electric strips kick on and they run at a COP of 1. Your heating efficiency on the coldest days of the year is not 3, it is 1. Depending on how many extreme cold days your location sees, this can meaningfully erode the annual efficiency numbers. It is a detail that rarely appears in the marketing materials. Now let us talk about the rebate structure more carefully, because this is where the incentive alignment becomes most visible. Under the current federal framework, the heat pump rebate advantage over a gas furnace replacement is not marginal. It is structural. The HEEHRA rebate program offers up to $8,000 for a heat pump and $0 for a gas furnace. The Section 25C tax credit caps at $2,000 for a heat pump and $600 for a gas furnace. Many state programs mirror this structure. The message built into the subsidy architecture is clear. We want you to choose the heat pump, and we are willing to pay a significant portion of the cost differential to make that happen. That is a policy choice, not a neutral market signal. To be fair, the policy intent behind this subsidy structure is not secret. Governments at the federal and state level have stated emissions reduction goals, and burning natural gas in residential furnaces produces carbon dioxide. A heat pump running on grid electricity produces no direct emissions at the point of use, even if the grid itself is still partially fossil fuel powered. From a climate policy standpoint, electrifying home heating is a stated priority, and the subsidy structure is the mechanism for achieving it. That is a legitimate policy goal. The problem is not that the goal exists. The problem is that the financial marketing around heat pumps often presents them as universally better for your wallet, when the data says that is only true for a minority of natural gas-heated homes at current rates. Let us talk about what happens at the point of sale, because this is where the information asymmetry is most acute. A homeowner calls an HVAC contractor because their furnace failed. The contractor arrives, diagnoses the failure, and begins the replacement conversation. The contractor knows the local rebate structure, the equipment margins, and the installation complexity. The homeowner knows almost none of that. The contractor may genuinely believe the heat pump is the right call, and sometimes it is. But the contractor also knows that the heat pump sale is more profitable, that the rebate paperwork gives them a processing role, and that the homeowner is in a distressed buying situation with a broken furnace in February. That combination of factors does not produce neutral advice. Here is a specific scenario that plays out in thousands of homes every winter. A homeowner's 20-year-old gas furnace fails. The contractor quotes a heat pump system at $14,000 installed, then shows the homeowner that after a $6,000 combined federal and state rebate, the net cost is $8,000. A gas furnace and AC replacement is quoted at $8,500 with no rebate. On paper, the heat pump looks like a wash or even a slight win. But the homeowner does not know that the heat pump will add $200 to $400 per year to their electric bill at current local rates. Over a 15-year equipment life, that is $3,000 to $6,000 in additional operating costs that were never part of the sales conversation. Now, I want to address something that heat pump advocates will correctly raise at this point. Electricity rates are not fixed. And natural gas prices are not fixed either. If natural gas prices rise significantly over the next 15 years, the heat pump math improves. If electricity rates rise, it gets worse. Both are possible. The honest answer is that nobody knows with certainty what utility rates will look like in 2035 or 2040. What you can know is what they are right now, what they have averaged over the past decade in your region, and what the current math says for your specific home. Making a $12,000 decision based on a speculative future rate scenario that a contractor is narrating to you in a sales conversation is not a sound approach. There is also a SEER rating conversation that often gets used to obscure more than it clarifies. SEER stands for Seasonal Energy Efficiency Ratio and measures cooling efficiency. A higher SEER rating means more efficient air conditioning. Heat pumps often carry SEER ratings of 18 to 22 or higher on premium models, compared to a standard central AC at 14 to 16 SEER. That is a real efficiency advantage for cooling. But SEER only measures the cooling side of the equation. It tells you nothing about heating efficiency in winter. A contractor who leads the heat pump conversation with SEER ratings is showing you the best number, not the complete picture. Cooling efficiency matters, but for most homes in cold climates, heating is where the bulk of your annual energy cost sits. Let me give you a framework for how to evaluate a heat pump quote when it lands in front of you, because walking in with a framework changes the entire conversation. Step 1. Ask the contractor to show you the estimated annual operating cost in dollars, not just in efficiency ratings, based on your actual local utility rates. Step 2. Ask them to show you the same calculation for a gas furnace and central AC replacement. Step 3. Calculate the true payback period on the cost difference after rebates using the annual operating cost difference. If the payback period is longer than the expected equipment life, the financial case is not there regardless of what the rebate brochure says. A contractor who refuses to do that operating cost comparison for you, or who cannot produce the numbers, or who pivots back to the rebate amount every time you ask about annual bills, is telling you something important. Not necessarily that they are dishonest, but that the sale is being structured around the subsidy rather than around your long-term financial interest. A contractor who is confident the heat pump is the right call for your specific home should be able to show you the math that proves it. If the math is not on the table, the math is not working in your favor. Let us talk about the homes where the heat pump recommendation is genuinely strong, because I want to be precise and fair. If your existing ductwork is in good condition and properly sized, you are replacing both a furnace and a central AC at the same time. You are currently on oil or propane heat. You live in a climate with relatively mild winters, or you are in a state with low electricity rates and high gas prices. The heat pump case is often compelling even before you factor in rebates. In those scenarios, the operating cost math, the equipment consolidation benefit, and the rebate stack can all align in your favor simultaneously. The problem is not that heat pumps are bad. The problem is that the universal push ignores the scenarios where they are not the right answer. There is a specific home profile that is almost ideal for a heat pump, and it is worth describing in detail. A home built after 2000 with good insulation, tight construction, and ductwork that was properly designed from the start, located in a climate zone 4 or milder, currently heating with oil or propane, and replacing both a furnace and AC that are both at end of life simultaneously. In that scenario, the heat pump consolidates two replacement costs into one. The operating cost math often works at current rates. The rebate stack can be substantial, and the ductwork is likely already adequate. If that profile describes your home, a heat pump deserves serious consideration, and the numbers will likely support it. Now let me describe the home profile where the heat pump push is most likely to lead you in the wrong direction. A home built in the 1970s or 1980s with older ductwork sized for a high-temperature gas furnace, located in climate zones 5, 6, or 7, which covers most of the upper Midwest and parts of the Mid-Atlantic, currently on natural gas at competitive rates, with only the furnace failing and the central AC still functional. In that scenario, replacing the furnace alone with a like-for-like gas furnace may cost $3,000 to $5,000 installed. A heat pump system to replace the furnace in the same home might cost $10,000 to $14,000 installed after rebates, with a payback period that stretches beyond the equipment's useful life. That is not a good deal, and it is the deal being offered every day. I want to address one more piece of the incentive picture that does not get enough attention: the role of HVAC trade associations and training programs. Many HVAC contractors are now being trained through manufacturer-sponsored programs and industry trade groups that have financial relationships with heat pump manufacturers. The curriculum in those programs naturally emphasizes the products and technologies that the sponsors make. A technician who is trained in a Carrier-sponsored or Lennox-sponsored program is going to be more fluent in the sales narrative around those brands' heat pump lines than in an objective cost-benefit analysis for the homeowner. This is not a conspiracy. It is just how industry training works, and it is one more reason why the advice you get from a contractor is not the same as independent analysis. Here is something worth knowing about how rebate programs are administered at the state level. In many states, the rebate programs are run by the utilities themselves or by third-party administrators contracted by the utilities. Those administrators have performance targets tied to the number of heat pump installations completed. They are not neutral parties evaluating whether heat pumps are the right choice for each home. They are organizations with a metric to hit, and their outreach, contractor training, and consumer marketing are all designed to maximize installations, not to maximize homeowner savings. When you call your utility to ask about rebates, you are talking to an organization that has already decided what answer it wants you to arrive at. Let me give you a specific number to anchor the scale of what is being pushed here. The Inflation Reduction Act allocated approximately $4.5 billion for the HEE-HRA rebate program alone. That is $4.5 billion specifically designated to move homeowners away from gas appliances and toward electric heat pumps, heat pump water heaters, and related equipment. That is not a small nudge. That is a major structural intervention in the residential HVAC market. When $4.5 billion is pointed in one direction, the entire contractor ecosystem, the manufacturer supply chain, and the utility marketing infrastructure all orient toward that direction. The homeowner sitting at the kitchen table with 3 heat pump quotes is the end point of a very large machine. Now, I want to be precise about what I am not saying. I am not saying heat pumps are bad technology. They are not. I am not saying the government's emissions reduction goals are illegitimate. They are not. I am not saying every contractor pushing a heat pump is acting in bad faith. Many are not. What I am saying is that when a technology is being pushed simultaneously by the federal government, state governments, electric utilities, equipment manufacturers, and rebate program administrators, all of whom have financial or regulatory reasons to want you to buy it, the information you receive in that environment is not neutral. It is curated. And the job of a detail-oriented homeowner is to understand the curation and make the decision based on their own numbers, not on the consensus of interested parties. Let me walk you through the specific data you need to gather before you have this conversation with a contractor. First, your last 12 months of natural gas bills. Find the total therms consumed and the average cost per therm. Second, your last 12 months of electric bills. Find the average cost per kilowatt hour. Third, your home's square footage and your current furnace's AFUE rating, which is the annual fuel utilization efficiency printed on the equipment label or in the owner's manual. Fourth, the age and condition of your existing ductwork. Fifth, whether you are replacing just the furnace, just the AC, or both simultaneously. Those 5 data points will let you run a legitimate comparison, and they are the 5 things a contractor will not volunteer if they already know what they want to sell you. Once you have those numbers, the operating cost comparison is straightforward arithmetic. Take your annual gas consumption in therms, multiply by the heat value of natural gas, which is 100,000 BTU per therm, and you have your annual heating BTU demand. Divide that by your furnace's AFUE to get the actual BTU your furnace is delivering. Now estimate what a heat pump with a seasonal heating coefficient of performance of roughly 2.5 to 3 would consume in kilowatt hours to deliver the same BTU output. Multiply those kilowatt hours by your local electricity rate. Compare that dollar figure to what you currently pay for gas heat. That difference, positive or negative, is the annual operating cost impact of switching. If it is negative, meaning you save money, by how much and how long until you recover the installation cost premium? There is one scenario I want to flag separately because it comes up constantly in the Mid-Atlantic market: the dual fuel or hybrid heat pump system. A hybrid system pairs a heat pump with a gas furnace backup. The heat pump handles the cooling season and mild weather heating, where it is most efficient. When outdoor temperatures drop below a set balance point, typically around 35 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit, the gas furnace takes over. This configuration captures most of the heat pump's efficiency advantage in moderate temperatures while avoiding the backup electric resistance penalty in extreme cold. It also means you keep your gas line active, which matters if gas rates stay competitive. For many homes in climate zones 5 and 6, a hybrid system is a more honest answer than a full heat pump replacement, and it is one that fewer contractors lead with. A hybrid system typically costs more than a straight furnace replacement, but less than a full heat pump system, and it does not require you to bet entirely on future electricity rates staying favorable. It is a hedge. For a homeowner in the upper Midwest who is not sure where utility rates are heading over the next 15 years, a hybrid system can be a rational middle position. The fact that it is not the first option on most contractor quotes is itself informative. The hybrid system does not qualify for the full HEEHRA rebate in the same way a full heat pump does, which means the rebate structure is actively steering the conversation away from what might be the most financially sensible option for a significant portion of homeowners. Let me bring this back to the central question. Why do they keep pushing heat pumps on everyone? The answer is not a single villain. It is a structural alignment of incentives that is genuinely unusual in its breadth. Federal policy wants emissions reductions. State policy wants to meet climate commitments. Electric utilities want kilowatt-hour growth. Equipment manufacturers want to sell high-margin variable speed equipment. Rebate administrators have installation targets to hit. Contractors have been trained in heat pump sales narratives and earn more on the sale. Every single one of those forces is pointing at you with the same message. And the one voice that is not in that room is an independent analyst who has run the operating cost math for your specific home, your specific utility rates, and your specific climate zone. The 27% figure from the New York analysis is the number I keep coming back to, because it is the most honest summary of the current situation for natural gas-heated homes. If only 27% of homes in a major northeastern state would see lower annual bills after switching, and heat pumps are being marketed and subsidized as the universal answer, then the gap between the marketing narrative and the financial reality for the majority of homeowners is very large. That gap is not going to close itself. It closes when homeowners walk into the contractor conversation with their own numbers, their own rate calculations, and their own payback period analysis. That is the only reliable way to get a decision that serves your interests rather than everyone else's. Here is where I want to land this. Heat pumps are a genuinely impressive technology. The cold climate performance advances of the last decade are real. The efficiency numbers are real. For the right home in the right climate with the right utility rate structure, a heat pump is an excellent choice, and the financial case is solid. But the universality of the push, the way every contractor, every rebate program, and every government communication is steering every homeowner toward the same answer, regardless of their individual situation, is not about your financial well-being. It is about a policy goal, a revenue goal, and a margin goal that all happen to coincide. Understanding that does not mean you should reject the heat pump. It means you should evaluate it on your own numbers, not on the consensus of people who all benefit from the same outcome. If you are watching this because you are staring down a furnace replacement right now, here is your action plan before you take another contractor call. Pull your last 12 months of gas and electric bills. Calculate your cost per therm and cost per kilowatt hour. Run the operating cost comparison using the framework I walked through earlier. Ask every contractor to show you the same calculation in writing. Ask specifically about hybrid system options and why they are or are not on the quote. And if a contractor cannot or will not show you the operating cost math, get a second quote from someone who will. The contractor knows things you do not, and that gap is where the money goes. Close the gap before you sign anything. If this video helped you see the heat pump conversation differently, the best thing you can do is share it with someone else who is facing the same decision. There are a lot of homeowners right now who are going to spend $12,000 to $16,000 on a system that was not the right call for their home because nobody ran the numbers with them before they signed. That is what this channel exists to prevent. Subscribe if you want to keep going deeper on HVAC decisions, contractor pricing, equipment reliability, and the fine print that nobody explains. I have videos coming up on how to read an HVAC quote line by line, how to evaluate heat pump brand reliability data, and what the SEER rating on your equipment is actually telling you. I will see you in the next one.